Just loving this internet out here in the parking lot of.
Well, Denise, thank you for sticking with us. Sorry, y'all. If you've been watching these live streams, go back and watch them in order that they keep dropping off the internet as we sit out here.
And listen, Hampton Inns have a great breakfast. Turns out they don't have great internet. So
The parking lot. But a heck of a waffle in the morning.
Real nice waffle bar.
We are so good to have Michael on. It was great responses. Denise McGraw from Catholics Vote Common Good. Super glad to have you with us, Denise. Thank you for sticking it out and for being a part of all of this. We are in the Central Time Zone. I know that you're in many people watching this are, so it is 10:08 here, 11:08 where you are. It's been a long day, Denise. How did the debate feel to you?
Can you guys hear me?
We got you.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. You know, you saw tonight why, despite every crazy article about the vetting process and how it failed and Donald Trump and JD Vance will say and do anything. He comes across so slick. He comes across as wanting to build bridges with Governor Walz. But as a woman, as a mother, as a woman of faith, I found that terrifying tonight. Just terrifying.
Yeah.
And it's be interesting now to see if that hit home for some people. But as you guys were talking before, and it was just so fascinating to listen to the three of you talk, and I'm so honored to be associated with the few who feel the way you do, to equate and women's health care and access to health care and carrying rapists babies and just all of these things, guys, to some of the other stuff that he wants to put it on the same plane with. Energy costs, those are all very important issues, but the stuff that's going on right now is just terrifying.
Yeah.
And there's I don't know, it's 35 long days, right?
It was hard for me to hear someone describing the Trump years as if that's what he wants again. In all honesty, and I know I believe for a long time Donald Trump is a unique threat to the well-being of this planet, everyone who lives on it, the Constitution, this country. I thought his administration was pathetic and harmful and inane and incompetent, and he was impeached not once but twice for his behavior. It was a disastrous administration.
And JD Vance agreed with all of that.
And JD Vance would have
He did
all of those things while it was going on and did. To see him stand there and act as if that's what you want you want a refill of that drink is just simply stunning.
Those were the good old days.
And I know
right.
There are a lot of people who feel that way, but to hear someone, and frankly, Tim Walz chose to just let that go on, to just let that unfold, and to not really critique that. But I think it's really fair to say, look, it was a total and complete disaster, the Trump administration, and I certainly don't want to go back to it ever again.
Yeah.
I thought it was a nightmare.
Yeah, I think Tim Walz got his sea legs about halfway through. He was certainly better and more comfortable when he got away from foreign policy and into domestic policy. As a resident of Minnesota, Doug, I will say I thought of you often when he said, my state is number one in X, whether it was childcare, it was addressing the home owner crisis, just all of these pieces that, he's obviously run a pretty good state. Now it's hard to get out of the way of the one-liners and the zingers and the going back to the good old days of the Trump administration and, all the rest. But I thought he was very good and very compelling and very comfortable when he was talking about being a governor and governing.
Hey, yeah, there's this funny thing in these kinds of debates, and this isn't specifically a faith leader response here, but they've been saying over and over for years Kamala Harris is completely incompetent to be president, as if being vice president doesn't give you the capacity to be president. But then tonight he acted as if she has been the one in charge the whole time. So that, and I
Right.
get it, that's just rhetoric, that's what you do. But that's an interesting thing, right? To be like, oh, Kamala Harris has been inconsequential. She hasn't done anything, hasn't been anything. She caused every single thing to happen, right?
Everything. The
It's
border,
it is a
COVID, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it is a curious pivot that they have to make. Which I get it. That's sort of the point when a vice president is running, and we have not had that very often in this country. We speak as if vice presidents running for office is a typical thing. It's quite
Da-da-da.
unusual,
No.
actually, and we don't really know how to respond to that. And we've never had a vice president run against a former incumbent while the vice president is the vice
I
president.
know.
You know,
Yeah.
it is a wildly peculiar moment that the United States' voters have never had to deal with. And JD Vance, I think, did himself a favor tonight, frankly, by not looking as crazy as he looks in every other thing you see in the media.
I know.
And I think even Trump supporters would say this. I think my guess is there's a bunch of YouTube videos going on right now where Trump supporters are saying JD Vance needed to be harder, he needed to hit Tim more. Like they're mad that he wasn't the JD
I
Vance
am sure.
of
I thought that exact
devastating
thing.
anger, right? They want
Guns and when he just agreed with Walls on just about anything, I'm sure they're not happy.
yes, when they're saying Tim and I, and he was all chummy,
Right.
we agree on this and that. So I don't know if that was a tactic or if that just happened. But both of these guys took the vice presidency to try to speak about their candidate they were supporting. They felt like surrogates more than they felt like people
Running
debating
mates,
each
yeah.
other for the same job.
But that's really all that JD Vance is, right?
Yes.
I mean, he's practically calling him Mr. Trump, President Trump, right? I mean, sir. All the ways that Donald Trump talks about himself,
That's right.
sir, you know.
That's right. Hey, as a Catholic, J.D. Vance is a newly converted Catholic, uses his Catholicism as a bludgeon in a lot of ways and all that. Was there anything particularly Catholic that triggered that fired you up tonight, other than Tim Walz saying
Triggered me. You
yeah,
know me well enough. I get triggered easily.
other than Tim Walz saying
Thank
good
you for
time to
calling
have
him
Christmas time?
a newly converted Catholic, because that really is a thing
Yeah,
in my little world here. And there's a lot of new Catholics. I'm going to be the confirmation sponsor of a newly converted Catholic next month.
yeah, good for you.
And we love it and welcome it. But he does use it as a weapon, and it is a means by which to limit people's rights and pontificate and tell us where one group is better than the other. Um, I expected more of that tonight.
Yeah,
And when we didn't really get it, I mean, that's where I'll go back to the way I started. I found this version of JD Vance pretty terrifying. I find all versions of JD Vance terrifying, because that was a really warm and fuzzy guy, right?
yeah, yeah,
3 kids. We know all about the 3 kids and their ages and all of that kind of stuff.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that's
That's
how he
good.
could write a book the way he wrote the book, right? I mean,
Yeah,
those are just, he says it all.
sure does. I feel like the highlight of that debate is going to be the last few minutes before the closing arguments. The question about democracy felt like
Well, yeah.
that's a moment where Tim Walz simply said, "Do you believe Donald Trump lost the election?" And J.D. Vance said,
And he could not answer it.
I want to focus on the future," which is a fine answer if that's what you have been saying the whole time. But if you spend your time talking about the last 4 years as being a failure and 8 years ago as being a success, and then you're questioned about the thing that's on so many people's minds, like us, that's why we have Supporting Democracy for All on this bus we're traveling in.
Right.
Simply say your answer to that is, I don't want to talk about the past, I want to focus on the future. And Donald Trump actually left the office peacefully, but I won't say
Oh, I know. Oh, I know.
election was really sad. Because if he believes, if you had asked Donald Trump, do you believe you lost the election in 2020? He would say no. J.D. Vance wouldn't even say the thing that he has had to say in order to be in this position.
Right, to get the
Which
job,
means
right? To
it
get
has
this
to
gig.
be a litmus test for being the VP, right? It has to be a thing where if you're asked this question, you respond this way. You don't
Yes.
admit anything,
Yes.
which is the Trump playbook. Never admit anything has gone wrong. Never look back.
I have heard Donald Trump say many times, and in person I've heard him say, I won the election and I won it by a lot. J.D. Vance was asked if he lost the election, and he said, I don't want to answer the question because I don't want to deal with the past. Why doesn't... So it's just frustrating where he clearly believes what Donald Trump says. And I thought Tim Walz walked right up to the line of being appropriate and basically saying, well, the shocking look on his eyes is probably going to be the meme that's going around already.
A few times. He gets that face pretty well. I liked it. I think he used it effectively.
Yeah, he was making that shocked face. And I do think he was actually shocked. And it was I thought a decent way to say it. I did think
So you're a liar without saying it. Yeah.
On the question of abortion, I did think J.D. Vance pushing Tim Walz on the law in Minnesota.
The bill, yeah.
Tim Walz could have said much more than we litigated that. That was checked in the last debate. I
Fact
don't know
checked.
why
You lied.
someone
Yeah.
who signed the law, he's obviously familiar with it, why he doesn't articulate what is in that law differently than what we heard tonight. And I feel like for a lot of voters for whom abortion in what they call late-term abortion is a problem, I thought Tim Walz did not put that issue in perspective the way that I think he feels like he could and should or did. And I didn't think it came across that way. Denise, do you have a feeling about that at all?
No. Yeah, I do this for a living, right? I advocate for laws to be. Is the issue? Where else are they going? So maybe didn't feel as though he needed to go that far on it, and they don't just call it late-term abortion. That's what people like us say. They call it like murder now, right? I mean, it's become a whole other thing, and maybe he just didn't want to walk into whatever that was going to be.
Yeah, Tim Walz did seem a little defensive, reluctant, uncomfortable with some of the questions he was asked about his statement about being at Tiananmen Square, and his response was like really uncomfortable. Like he tried to clear it up
Well, he kept talking
vaguely, and then just kept going and tried to.
My husband, I turned to him twice and said, please stop talking.
Just stop talking. Just say, I misspoke.
It was a Biden moment.
I'm sorry I did that.
First time around.
And there was
I know.
a little connection moment between them where I think Tim Walz said something like, I know what it's like to misspeak. And J.D. Vance said, yeah, tell me about it. Like there was a little moment where they're like, yeah, this is really hard. Frankly, it's really hard to do. It's hard to be a public person. It's hard to speak openly and honestly and accurately in all the environments, and at least they own that a little bit, but our political environment doesn't give a lot of grace for people.
Really doesn't allow for it. No.
And unless it's your
I was already 20 minutes after he.
Go ahead, Denise.
20 minutes after he said the thing about, I know school shooters. He lost you.
Oh yeah, he misspoke.
I'm gone.
A couple of times, yeah.
The New York Post was already sending emails about it.
Yeah, I did get a slew of emails that came early from groups or text messages saying the debate is over and you can see why, and the debate wasn't over. So I think the timing was off by some number, like at 9:30 or something.
Missed the time zone, yeah.
Well, Denise, anything else? We know it's been a long day and we don't want to keep you up. But anything else?
No. It's my pleasure to be on, guys. All right.
And Denise,
Keep it up.
If somebody wants a Catholics for Harris sign in their yard, what should they do?
They should go to the website, catholicsvoteCommonGood.org. We've got postcards, we've got lawn signs, we've got t-shirts like the lovely t-shirt I'm wearing right now. We have it all. But most importantly, you can connect to a much larger community of Catholics throughout the country who desperately care about the future of our democracy and want to be helpful in some way. And we will certainly welcome your help and your support for the next 35 days.
A lot of work to do. The whole country does. Thank you, Denise.
Bye, Denise.
Bye now.
All right. Who do we have with us? Is there another one in there?
Got David Key.
Yeah,
Is
David, great.
is David still with us?
David, I hope you're still with us. Denise is still with us. It's nice to see you still here, Denise. But David is with us as well. Hi, David. David,
Can y'all hear me?
Loud and clear.
Are you in Georgia, buddy?
Great. Yeah, we're trying to recover from a hurricane that came through here earlier last week. So luckily not locally, but family and friends around the state who were
David,
having to recuperate from it.
I think the second question from the moderators tonight was about hurricane.
Yeah, and I think I want to highlight a little of what Denise said in relation to Governor Walz, his comfortability talking about Minnesota. I think when you deal with a disaster like a hurricane, but it could be anything, that you need good governmental services. I mean, the whole Southeast needs good governmental services. And I felt like when Tim Walz was referencing Minnesota, you realize it was somebody who knows how to deliver good governmental services. And that was kind of a subtle dynamic. It wasn't the talking points that you all have been referencing earlier, but I think it was just the overall narrative, because I didn't feel like J.D. Vance, of course, doesn't have that in his resume. So it felt like a really good governmental executive speaking. He was comfortable in it, and it delivered. I mean, it was government that delivers. I think a lot of people want that.
Yeah, and that is a difference between the two. Tim Walz has been elected congressman for 20 years. He's been a governor for 6. There's a lot of experience. J.D. Vance has been a hedge fund investor and a writer after 4 years in the military as a teenager, starting as a teenager, and been a senator for 18 months. So the experience level was quite different. And I'm not always sure that people want their presidents and vice presidents to be their governors or not. I don't know. It's a curious thing, right? Whether you want your president, vice president to be the pragmatic, get the job done types or not. It's something
Well, you have to look back in history. I mean, Jimmy Carter, George W. Bush, Bill Clinton all came with governor experiences, whereas others came with other experiences. But I don't know. I mean, I think a good governor that has actually produced stuff will be in the conversation, I think is what I'm saying. I felt like Walz was showing what he can bring to the cabinet, what he can bring, in speaking to the president, just some real ways of making it happen when it gets to the local level.
Well, David, as a faith leader, what struck you in the debate tonight?
Well, I was really glad that Governor Walz referenced, gave some scripture reference. I don't feel like we've gotten a good sense of his good Lutheranism, because I think the country could use some, good down home, mainline denomination Lutheranism kind of piece. And he showed a little bit of that tonight, not a whole lot, but a little bit.
Yeah, reference
it was
Matthew
interesting.
25 and yeah.
Yeah, he gave a good scripture reference that was there. It was interesting that I didn't feel like J.D. Vance talked much about his Catholicism. I mean, it came through. I mean, y'all just referenced it with Denise. He kind of didn't handle that as much. And so anyway, I felt like Tim Walz did bring that, and I'm not sure we've had enough of that in the campaign. Um, I think we could use a little bit more simply because I think it's a strength. It's a strength of our side this time around.
Yeah. Any topics strike you? Anything you heard from either of them that felt like it was unnerving or nerve building for you?
Well, again, I think Tim scored some really strong points there toward the end when he differentiated himself from J.D. Vance on the whole Trump and what would he do if Trump said the election was stolen? I mean, I thought that was extremely powerful. The January 6th dynamic because they had been kind of chummy the whole debate. I mean, oh, we agree, and I'm glad to see that. I mean, it was nice to have some civility compared
Sure.
to other debates that we've had. So it's nice to kind of see that. But I felt like Tim Walz did a really good job of kind of differentiating that point, and I thought that was one of his real strengths of the debate. J.D. Vance kind of threw off climate change a little bit. Again, it wasn't a major point, but he just kind of said, "Well, if we agree with this," and he didn't want to get in the debate over climate change and carbon emissions and all that. I mean, he kind of made sure that they didn't talk about that. But again, having been the um, victim of a hurricane just coming through, which, thanks to climate change, hit parts of the Southeast that have never been hit before. I mean, we had places that have historically been safe during hurricanes. They got hit really hard this time
Yeah.
around. And so anyway, I felt like his kind of dismissal of it, it wasn't highlighted in the debate, but I do think it was there. Um, as he was kind of referencing that. Those would be probably two big points for me. They both nuance the reproductive rights dynamic. I mean, you can see both of them kind of dancing on that issue on both sides to kind of make sure they didn't get into trouble of it. And JD proved. I mean, he was much better than Trump. I mean, so if anything, I would argue JD Vance comes across so much better than Donald Trump did. Um, and and again, yeah, it was a lie. It was everything you all said previously with the other guests, but he was smooth. He was extremely smooth, and I guess that Yale education really made a difference
I'm just
in how he
I'm kind
pull
of
it off. He proved his degree there at that point.
yeah, perhaps. I'm struck by by the fact that we just don't care who the vice president is, and there hasn't,
Well,
we do this. It's important. We should get to know these candidates. Both of these guys are very unknown to the American people. It has a very deep sense that it's been some number of weeks since they were both picked, 7 or 8 weeks. I think J.D. Vance referenced that, like by saying, 7 or 8 weeks we've been out, because J.D. Vance has been in sort of public sphere for a couple of years, running for Senate, but not really outside of Ohio. And Tim Walz, is the governor of a state, my home state, but a state that is, one that people don't pay a lot of attention to. You get confused whether it's Montana or Missouri or Michigan or Minnesota or Maine. It's one of the M states.
yeah.
So these guys are both unknown, introducing themselves. I would imagine most Americans, if they watch this debate, would be like, "That's the most I've heard from either of them, and I don't know anything about them."
Yeah.
So I wonder if what that does for the campaign.
I don't think either one fumbled the ball. So they didn't. When doing a football analogy, they didn't fumble the ball, and I think that's ultimately what you want to be concerned about: a VP fumbling the ball. So let's have an interesting conversation here, just for a moment. Poor VPs. I mean, two come to mind: Sarah Palin and Dan Quayle. Sarah Palin I would argue, kept John McCain from getting elected. I mean, was a detriment to him being elected. Whereas Dan Quayle was not that great, but he didn't keep George H.W. Bush from being elected. What do we learn from that dynamic, those two? and I'm not sure JD Vance falls into those categories. I don't know. I mean, do you think he does? Is he as bad as Sarah Palin?
You know, Sarah Palin in the debate against Joe Biden did pretty well. If you remember back,
Hmm.
there was a moment where when she first came on the stage, literally on the stage, in the convention. I was there. I was at the convention, sitting. I was reporting for the PBS Religion News Hour on what would be the impact of a woman vice president in the Republican Party among religious voters who don't believe women should be leaders in churches. Right. That was the bit. So I happened to sit right behind her, like in the up in the stage, looking at the same thing she was seeing, which included her teleprompter. The teleprompter went out during her speech. That was the point that she ad-libbed that whole put lipstick on a pig hockey mom thing. That whole bit was her just in the moment pivoting, and then you know, and in the debate she walks up to Joe Biden and says, can I call you Joe? And it made it through, and then it all collapsed after the debate.
And refreshing in that debate.
Yeah.
And then you heard the real her afterward.
So she started a little high. JD Vance is the other way around. Like, he came on the scene and his approval ratings among Republicans is way low. Below 50% of Republicans are like, I'm glad he's the guy. Like 90% are glad Donald Trump is, and 50% are glad JD Vance is. So I wonder, to your point, David, if this debate could move it the other, like have the opposite effect of a Sarah Palin, and the kind of gravitas. I wonder if JD Vance to some people would be like, oh, he seems like a reasonable guy, and I feel more comfortable with that. I don't know, because his public persona up till this point has been disastrous. I think disastrously earned. I think he is more the way he has behaved in the 7 weeks up till now than he did in the 90 minutes tonight. But I don't know what that would do to a voter. It's hard for me to imagine
Yeah, I'm just
voters, let alone 10,000 voters, change their plans of voting because of a vice presidential nomination. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
well, with the Sarah Palin phenomenon, we have to thank Saturday Night Live for helping save us from Sarah Palin, because it really was Saturday Night Live in some ways that saved us from it, because those were hilarious skits that they did. We've not seen the similar dynamic in relation to JD Vance. I have not. You may have seen something that I haven't seen, but I've not seen the same kind of cultural phenomenon in relation to JD Vance, and I'm not sure why. Because I do think he has some material to use, but I just think tonight he came across so much more digestible. You feel like you could live with him more now than previously,
Yeah,
than what
and
we've known for
honestly,
2 months.
the caricature ability is much greater for Tim Walz. He's a more caricaturable, I don't think that's the word, but a more
Mhm.
caricaturable person, because he's just there's a lot of
He is a
flair.
character,
He's
yeah.
a character, yeah. He just gets that thing, and he doesn't finish his sentences with the words that he started talking about. He finishes with a lot of open-ended that's and thems and theirs, instead of saying, like, and they can't afford healthcare. He'll say, and they can't afford that. Like, he speaks in the open conjunction at the end of the sentence. And it's a very Minnesotan,
Mhm.
Western speech pattern problem. And even has said his wife, who's an English teacher, I think maybe an English professor, is like, you have to use language differently than that. And he says she's on me all the time about it, but that makes it endearing. He's that kind of character. Where JD Vance is the kind of character, when you watch all of his other news things, he's just aggressive and combative. The way he was with Dana Bash on an interview, the way he was just so attack animal. And tonight he wasn't. And I wonder how the MAGA crowd that just wants a rabid dog attack on liberals and chew their throats out kind of approach to their leaders. I I wonder how they're feeling about J.D. Vance tonight. I don't know. My friends who hate liberals more than they love Donald Trump, so they love Donald Trump because they think Donald Trump hates liberals more than they do. Right? That's their bargain deal they've made.
Mhm.
Love J.D. Vance that they think he's just a crusher on wokeness and hates them and goes after them. It's just, he's a thug. I wonder how they feel about this guy. I would mention this with Denise, but I don't know.
We'll have to see. We'll have to watch that and see. The other thing, Doug, that one theory that I'm kind of playing with these days is, Donald Trump, when he came on the scene in 2016, really used his celebrity status, the "you're fired" model from The Apprentice. And I would argue to beat those Republicans, those 12, 13 Republicans that were on stage with him, he used celebrity to kind of be able to defeat them in ways they didn't know how to handle. They weren't used to that kind of dynamic. It was to the point that Democrats even wanted to run Oprah Winfrey, kind of get celebrity against celebrity back at that point. I mean, because it was a phenomenon. The fascinating thing about celebrity status, though, is it's something that doesn't last forever. Poor Madonna is trying to come back and do it or whatever, and she's passed. I mean, she's old celebrity. Versus the Taylor Swift, which is, the new phenomenon celebrity piece. And I think Donald Trump continues to try to run on the celebrity model. Even today, I mean, he still wants to be seen as the boss and stuff. And I think the Harris campaign's been really smart to kind of try to hit that. Where in her debate, she said, "Oh, you've been fired by 70 million people or whatever." I mean, she really has kind of gone against the celebrity image that he has. I think he's using an old model, and I just don't know. I think that may be where his vulnerability is at the moment. He has a loyal base, don't get me wrong, just like people who show up for the Rolling Stones concerts today or the Grateful Dead or whoever. I mean, there are people that will stay with him for 50 years if need be. But not a whole lot of younger ones, and not a lot of new people. The people who don't know the Apprentice, the ones who weren't alive during The Apprentice, or who were really young, they don't seem to be buying into the celebrity
Right.
piece about it. And so J.D. Vance, I think, may be seeing the need for a different strategy. And I don't know how that will play, because you're right. I think most of his base is still The Apprentice. I call it The Apprentice base.
Yeah.
They still want him to fire people to do that model. And I think J.D. Vance may be seeing that ain't going to last. Or J.D. Vance may also be seeing how he's going to set up his campaign for 2028. I mean, that'd be the other thing to ask the question. He may be trying to sow the seeds for whatever happens next time around.
Yeah, it did seem intentional that he took a calmer, more like palatable version of himself. He wasn't talking to the MAGA crowd. He was talking to the people that maybe have been Republicans their whole lives but are a little uncomfortable with voting for Trump. But, J.D. Vance seems like a nice guy, family guy, Catholic guy, and he doesn't, he found some common ground with Tim Walz. Oh, it was a nice debate. We're traveling around the bus trying to convince faith voters to not vote for Donald Trump. Do you think J.D. Vance's performance or Tim Walz's performance tonight swayed those faith voters in one direction or the other?
In all honesty, I'm afraid it may be a stalemate. I'm not sure anybody fumbled the way Trump fumbled, I would say, in the first debate. So I don't know that anybody fumbled in this debate. And I would think the ones who kind of came into it just gave more support to it. I do think one of the great things that Tim Walz does is that homie kind of piece really does kind of, I think, connect, especially to rural voters. And that's one thing that the Democrats have had difficulty for the last couple of election cycles. Again, the last point I think was a home run for Tim Walz. Will that be enough? We'll see. We'll see in the next few days.
Yeah, and if you stuck it through, if you watched, first of all, if you tuned into the vice presidential debate, you're a subset of culture.
Right.
Only thing more than do a podcast talking about the parking lot. That could be the only more quirky subset. But then if you watch all the way through to the end of the debate, uh, you're really a particular subgroup of people. But
Mm-hmm.
that includes people who are really torn, like they're not sure what they want to do and are taking this seriously. And David, you know this well, being in Georgia, it could very well come down to 11,718 votes or whatever it is in Georgia. Like
Mm-hmm.
across the country, half that number of people might be making their decision based on this debate. 6,000 people in all of Georgia, not very many. That many people bought Starburst today in Georgia. Like it's a teeny number of people. So because we're in an election where 5 states, maybe 6 are going to matter, and in those 5 or 6 states, maybe 12 counties are going to matter of all the country.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers become so thin because it's not just maybe 10 or 11,000 in Georgia, something similar in Arizona, maybe 20,000 in Wisconsin, or 50 or 60,000 in Michigan, similar in Pennsylvania. Man, you could really see how something like this could just move just enough people, one way or the other, that a bunch of farmers said, oh, if Kamala Harris seems okay to Tim Walz, I'm okay with her. Or
Mm-hmm.
Vance seems reasonable.
Yeah, in Georgia,
Says okay to Donald Trump.
Doug, in Georgia, they just need to get these rural counties that go like 80-20 for Trump. They need to just pull it down to like 60-40 or whatever. I mean, it's just a matter of shifting some votes. And we saw that in our governor elections the last couple of cycles. You really need to cut in to so those counties that were going so overwhelmingly for Trump, pulling it down a little bit could make a difference in some of that. And so I do think that's a positive thing that he did. And again, I think an undecided voter, Tim Walz did nothing, I would think, to keep an undecided voter from coming to Kamala Harris. I mean, I think he did the job he needed to do and was very powerful for that.
One of the things we know from
Yeah.
polling is that many people still don't feel like they know Kamala Harris, and they very much feel like they know Donald Trump. So it's going to be somewhat of a debate, of a decision between going for something that feels new and fresh. Tim Walz tried to hit that at the end. I feel like people could watch the debate tonight and be like, oh, Tim Walz tells me something about what Kamala Harris is like, and I didn't know that. I feel like people could watch this and be like, boy, that didn't really sound like the way Donald Trump would say things. Like the contrast between J.D. Vance and Donald Trump is more severe, I'm guessing, in people's minds, because Trump is such a well-known flavor, and J.D. Vance didn't give off that same flavor. Then people probably assuming, oh, that's kind of how Tim Walz and Kamala Harris are. So I just wonder what that will do. Because just, again, I can't get over.
Well, Doug, I mean, I think J.D. Vance was dealing with talking points. So he stayed disciplined. He was very disciplined about, Kamala Harris is responsible for the inflation you're feeling, food prices. But I mean, he stayed so disciplined. And one of their new talking points is the censorship stuff. They really are trying to dig home on the censorship piece, which, you've got the banning books and other things, which is part of their fault, in that. And so there's some landmines there, but I do know that's a new talking point. And I'm amazed by people I know who, had an abortion, smoked pot. You would think they'd be voting a certain way, and yet censorship is a huge thing for them. Yep. And J.D. Vance knows that. There's some polling that they've done that have said censorship, and especially around COVID, is a big point, and he was disciplined. He brought that into the equation in ways that we haven't seen previously.
The problem J.D. Vance has, and the problem that the Trump campaign has, is that no matter what surrogate tries to sanitize what Trump says, Trump then comes out the next day and says the crazy thing and ruins all that work. So
my guess is that
you're right on that. You're right.
That right now, Donald Trump is figuring out how tonight he takes the headlines away from J.D. Vance.
Yeah.
He will not want people to think J.D. Vance was helping Donald Trump. I think that drives him crazy.
Good point.
He doesn't need help.
I bet we could look right now, and Donald Trump would be headline stealing from JD Vance. He doesn't want kind of. And I think that Tim Walz did it very gently. I would have liked Tim Walz to have said very specifically, if you're a Republican and you voted for Donald Trump in 2016, maybe even voted for him in 2020, join Mike Pence and do not support Donald Trump in this next election. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Be a Mike Pence conservative. I think they should come out, the Harris campaign, and say this every single day. Not only say that Dick Cheney supports Kamala Harris, but the last two vice presidential candidates for the Republican Party, Paul Ryan and Mike Pence, do not lend their support and have said they will not support Donald Trump. They should just start leaning into that and let those people be the permission givers to stay away. And he kind of said tonight, the reason Mike Pence is not standing here is because of what he did
on January 6th.
And you're here because he got up to that, and he made that point. And I hope they will start to employ Mike Pence in the final weeks here to a very select group of people, because it's my view, David, I'm interested in your thoughts on this. Donald Trump doesn't win in 2016 without evangelicals over-supporting Donald Trump versus any other Republican candidate or any other presidential candidate in American history. More evangelicals, a higher percentage, voted for Donald Trump, 81% in some form. That number went down in 2020, but it was at its peak because of Mike Pence and Mike Pompeo.
Sure.
Like he doesn't peak. He doesn't go from 50% evangelical support in June of 2020 to nearly 75% by the time you get to the convention in 2016, and 80% on election day without Mike Pence. And now he's flying without Mike Pence. And I think they should go after that all day long. What do you think?
Now, yes, I agree with you on the strategy exactly, Doug. The issue is, I think Mike Pence is trying to create a strategy of his own. I know he was down here with our governor, and they did some stuff together as a governor here. And so Mike Pence is putting something together. He's trying to lay groundwork for the post-Trump Republican Party, as are some other people. He's not the only one. I mean, Haley is. Our governor is. I mean, there are a whole bunch of people that are kind of doing post-Trump thing. And so that's the only thing that I don't think Mike Pence may be cooperative, because he's trying to create his own thing.
I see.
Now, the other thing, Doug, that's interesting is this whole... I'm sorry, what?
And you're saying the Harris campaign wants to be careful not to overly make a hero out of Mike Pence.
Not necessarily. No, I think it may be Mike Pence's decision not to be seen so heavily with Harris, because there is this dynamic of what are happening to these Republicans so tied into Harris. Are they now going to be out of the party? Even with Trump being out of the party, will they be tainted? So, that's the question, because our own Jeff Duncan, who former lieutenant governor of Georgia, there's a real question of why is Jeff Duncan doing what he's doing, and I think he does envision a post-Trump Republican piece, but he may have made a risk too far. I don't know. We'll see.
That Mike Pence would support Kamala Harris. I think Mike Pence fits in the category of millions of other evangelicals who
just don't vote.
Harris, but will not vote for Donald Trump. And they should encourage that reality. In my view, they should encourage that reality whenever possible. Because if he loses,
I agree.
10,000, 20,000 evangelicals in Georgia who say, like, I'm sticking with Mike Pence, that's that solves for Georgia.
Well, and I think what's fascinating with evangelical, let's take that block for a minute. I do think evangelicals for Harris is an interesting kind of phenomenon to see what that group how coalescing that group's going to be, what that means for evangelicalism post the election, I think will be an interesting dynamic to see. Because I know one of the things that we would have to think about and talk about would be uh, is the definition of evangelical, especially self-identifying evangelical. Has that changed from 2016 to 2024? Um, because I'm not sure people are using the old model of evangelical, go down the list of faith statement kind of things. Whereas now people may be identifying as evangelical strictly for political stance, not for a religious stance. So, that'd be another thing to think about and to do research on.
Yeah.
Well, it seemed like you had one more comment there, David. Did you, or was that? Did you get what you were hoping for?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you get in everything you're hoping for? It seemed like you were saying one more thing, and I.
No. That's just the dynamic of what happens to evangelicalism post this election, what happens to Republicans post this election. There's a lot of soul searching that will be going on, especially if Trump loses. So, or when he loses, there'll be a lot of soul searching going on in those two.
When he wins again, but still isn't elected president.
Yeah, I mean, I thought they'd do some soul searching after 2020, but didn't.
Well, David, thank you for being on, and
well, y'all, thanks, and y'all are doing a great job. Thank you for the good work y'all are doing, because it makes a world of difference. Thank you.
Hey, we're coming back to Georgia in the 21st and 22nd of.
Good.
We'll see you then.
Yeah, you're going to be in Atlanta. I think you're going to Rome. You're gonna go see Marjorie Taylor Greene, aren't you? Is that what's happening? Y'all are going that way.
We've got a few places to go.
Luckily, she's not my congressperson.
At that point, we'll get 4 events a day, so we'll come find you. Thank you, David.
Let's connect. We'll do that. Good
Take
luck.
care.
Safe travels.
Thank you. Well, I think we've searched every corner of that couch.
Found every coin. And came up wanting. There's
Came up wanting, yeah. At the end of all of this, very few people are voting for J.D. Vance or Tim Walz.
right.
Did they encourage their side? Are they a booster? Are they building the hometown crowd effect that'll lift the piece a little bit? Maybe. I truly believe Donald Trump picked J.D. Vance when he thought he was going to run against Joe Biden and thought he was going to win, and pick somebody who didn't matter. And never cared a minute about who it was. Just didn't want some stick in the mud like.
Yeah.
Vance, but I don't know. I think Donald Trump is just probably now saying no one cares about the vice president. Like he said when they asked him about who he's picking, and he said it doesn't matter because nobody cares about the vice
Yeah.
president.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, I think both of them, like David said, didn't fumble the ball. They kept to their talking points. They didn't bomb.
And they weren't fiery.
Yeah. Which, would be great if we could get back to politics that weren't inflammatory and divisive and
just make you feel so bad about your neighbor.
right. Yep. So hopefully we get there.